You're listening to the Creativepreneur Podcast, episode 26, and today we're continuing our conversation from episode 25 on how control is preventing you from getting everything that you want. So, stay tuned. Hello, my name is Rodney Washington, author, artist, and entrepreneur, and I'm passionate about helping creatives just like you do what lights you up and make a comfortable living while doing it. Each week, I'll be sharing timely business growth, marketing, and mindset hacks and interviews with courageous creative entrepreneurs to inspire you to get paid for your creativity. So grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and enjoy today's show. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by my free audio, book, and PDF, Get Paid for Your Creativity, 57 Ways to Monetize Your Gifts and Create True Security for Yourself. To get your hands on a copy of the free audiobook and PDF, go to getpaidforyourcreativity.com/57ways-gift. So welcome back to another episode of the Creativepreneur Podcast. We are now on episode 26. Almost 6 months into the podcast. We'll be having an anniversary coming up on October the 9th. So maybe I'll plan something special for that. But I'm really excited to be back with you with another episode here. Now, I wanted to start off this episode by talking about what inspired this particular show. I really honestly did not have a topic already in mind before I started recording. I actually sometimes find inspiration from quotes or other things I've talked about or written. Maybe I might pull things from the free gift, which I have available for you here in the show notes here, which I talked about at the start of the show. I get inspiration from everywhere. Lately, I've been getting a lot of inspiration from a particular gentleman that I'm going to be talking about quite a bit in this particular episode of the podcast. I introduced him a little bit in episode 25, which you can get at getpaidforyourcreativity.com/025 for episode 25. But anyway, Mr. Jim Fortin and I I discovered him about a little over a year ago, and I'll be talking again more about him in a moment because he really inspired a lot of what I'm going to be talking about. And I'll talk about why he's inspiring me and how he's helping me to even do hopefully even a better show, do a better podcast, because this is something that I'm really enjoying doing, and I'm glad to be here doing this with you. But as I said, I get inspiration from everywhere. I didn't really plan on continuing the conversation from episode 25, which I talked about how control, in particular, which I label control as essentially not trusting our emotions around the result that we will get from doing something that we were passionate about. If you listen to that episode, again, I recommend going back and listening to it even before you listen to this one. So if you did listen to 25, I should recommend stopping this podcast now, this episode now, pause it, go back and listen to 25, because this here, I think, is going to make this whole experience a full circle moment for you. Anyway, what I talked about in episode 25 was about how control, and what I mean by that is when we try to control circumstances, people, situations, whatever you want to call it, we're not allowing ourselves to trust that we can handle the outcome of whatever it is that we get. When we feel the need that we have to not take action on things because we can't control what's going to come of it. Say you decide to start a project, but you put the pause button on it because you can't control if it's going to get, let's say using a book for an example, if you can't control if the book's going to get actually published, you may pause yourself from actually writing the book because what you're really saying is, I don't know if I can handle if the book doesn't get published. What if I put in all of this work and no one publishes it? What if I create this program or this course, or I do this, whatever this project may be? What if I start this business and I can't make it successful, whatever that may mean? And so if we get caught up in the fact that what we're really saying is, I can control my emotions around if I don't get what I want, then what's the point in starting? And so I talked about a lot of that in episode 25. And then this episode, like I said, 26, I think it's going to make the whole thing full circle for you to help you move forward on what you want to do and do it in a way where you would do it consistently and release the need, which I talked about in episode 25, release the need to know how it's all going to unfold, but allow yourself to get into action and do what you want to do with passion and enjoy what you're doing and be in the moment of it and know that you're learning. Even if you quote unquote fail, whatever that means, you still have the ability to continue forward. You're just learning a way that didn't work. I may get into a topic about that. I probably will get into this as a future episode on the topic of failure. But anyway, for now, we're going to talk about, again, that need to control and releasing the need to control how we respond. Releasing the need to feel that if we don't get it the way we want it, we're not going to be able to handle it, because that is only a story we're telling ourselves. We can handle whatever the outcome may be, and we will pivot as necessary and then continue moving forward. So anyway, I wanted to, again, when I stumbled across this particular quote today on Instagram, it immediately sparked a focus for this particular episode, and I felt like it tied into episode 25, and then also gave me another opportunity to share some of the nuggets of wisdom that I've been learning from Mr. Fortin, Mr. Fortin, who I've been talking about. I'm going to talk about a little bit more in depth in this episode. So the quote that inspired this episode goes like this: when your actions contradict your words don't mean anything. And when I saw this quote on Instagram, it just, like, I couldn't look at anything else. I mean, the second I saw it, I said, that's the focus of this episode of the podcast. I already knew it. I just had to wrap it together and, put everything around it. But I knew when I saw that I had to do that. I had to make the focus of this on that. And as I said before, if you didn't listen to 25, I recommend going back and doing that now. Maybe hit the pause button, do that, then come back. But if not, listen and then go back and listen to 25. Whatever you want to do, it's all good. So, as I mentioned a second ago, being addicted to control, and again, it really is an addiction. I mean, I personally can attest to, if I don't feel like I can control what I'm saying, a situation, I don't want to move forward on it. But again, what I've really begun to realize is if I feel like I can't control my emotions around it, around whatever I may perceive, the disappointment, the loss, or whatever, I don't want to move forward on it. And that, in a way, is a form of self-sabotage. But there's even a way to even go further than that, and I'm going to talk about that, and that's the focus of this episode. So what I have come to the realization is the perceived inability to handle whatever may come, be it disappointment, loss of money, or just things plain not working out as we want, is actually greater than any possible reward we might hope to gain. When that's driving you more than the possibility of what you hope to gain, you are basically out of control for yourself. You're not allowing yourself to make mistakes, to learn from quote unquote mistakes, learn from failure, and then course correct as necessary. And it can really slow you down on really achieving what you want to achieve in life, because again, you're trying to maintain your emotions around the disappointment, as opposed to staying focused on, this is what I did, this is the result that I got. Okay, that didn't work out the way I wanted. Let me look at what some options are, pivot where necessary, and then go back to work. As opposed to personalizing what's happened as maybe a disappointment and saying, well, this is all about me, and I'm a failure, and I'm a screw up, and I don't know what I'm doing. Getting into all of that kind of thinking, which really is not even the truth of the situation. You took an action. It didn't come out the way you hoped or wanted. You just learned a way that didn't work. So then we'll all pivot, course correct, and then continue forward. Now, again, as I said before I dive deeper into this topic, I want to take a moment to share how I learned many of these concepts and what I'm going to talk about today. Again, as I said, if you listen to episode 25, I mentioned Jim Fortin. I'm going to talk about him a little bit more right now. If you don't know who he is, I highly recommend that you check him out. I'm going to provide lots of resources here in this episode, because I have a feeling I'm going to be referencing him quite a bit and his teachings in future episodes of the podcast. As a matter of fact, I really hope to have him on the show one day, but until then, here's a brief introduction. Jim is an international subconscious transformation high performance expert with over 2 decades of experience in brain-based transformation and high performance. He's also a certified master practitioner of neurolinguistic programming, NLP, and a certified master hypnotist. And his podcast is called the Jim Fortin Podcast, which the link is available in the show notes at getpaidforyourcreativity.com/026. Now, Jim just recently completed the launch of a free series that he was doing called the Be Do Have Transformation from the Inside Out, free series leading up to his signature program, which he just closed the doors on, called the Transformation Coaching Program. Now, if he runs the series again, which I highly suggest, which I know he's going to do at some point, I really suggest getting on his wait list. I'll talk more about that in a moment, but and I don't have a direct link for how to get on his wait list. If I find one, I will add it to the show notes for this episode. But if not, this is what I really recommend you do. Check out his podcast. I've got the link in the show notes here, and just get on his email list. He'll let you know when he opens up the series again. This Be Do Have series is what I'm going to be talking about a little bit in this episode, and it's going to tie up everything I'm talking about together, because this Be Do Have concept that he has really, to me, bypasses a lot of stuff we get in our heads about why we can't achieve something, why we can't accomplish something. And I really got tremendous value out of listening to several episodes of his podcast well before this free series came out. So even if the series doesn't come out for several months again, I do recommend checking out, going back to episode number 1 and listening. I think he has about 50 episodes now of his podcast. I recommend listening from 1 and go straight through, because you'll learn a lot of his Be Do Have concept. Now, I'm also going to reference one particular episode in a moment that I just listened to recently, episode 23, where he talks about some of the things that was going to be the focus of this episode of the podcast, which we're talking about in just a moment on commitment. Now, what I want to do is I want to go back to that quote I just mentioned a moment ago, because, again, I want you to ponder the words as I'm saying them, and really let those words kind of sink in for you. Okay, so we'll start from there. When your actions contradict your words don't mean anything. Now, for me, at its core, what this quote is talking about, and this is how I first learned this term, was through Jim Fortin, was the term of self-integrity. And as I said, I heard him say it when I heard him being interviewed on the Mind Your Business podcast by James Wedmore, who's another podcast I recommend you check out. And I'm also going to have a link to the particular interview James did with Jim, also in the show notes here at getpaidforyourcreativity.com, episode 26. Now, according to Jim, when we allow ourselves to be who we need to be, we will do the things we need to do in order to have the things and life experiences we want to have. I'm going to read that again. When we allow ourselves to be who we need to be, we will do the things we need to do in order to have the things and life experiences we want to have. Now, the concept may sound simple, and it might take a moment or two to wrap your head around it. And I will even go so far as to say it may even sound a little bit woo-woo to you. But I really suggest that you sit with that for a moment and really let it sink in, because it's really quite profound, and I'll explain. And I'll use myself as an example. Before I launched this podcast that you're listening to right now, I said to myself, I'm only going to do this if I can commit to at least 1 episode per week, no matter what. And since I started publishing this podcast in April of this year, 2019, I've only missed 1 week. Now, I'm going to be really candid and really transparent here. At the time I'm recording this, I'm not getting a ton of downloads on this podcast, at least not yet. And as such, it would be very, very easy for me just to say, oh, it's okay, I can skip this week because I'm not getting that many listeners anyway. But here's the deal. Even as you're listening to my words this very moment, unless until I just told you, you don't know that I'm not getting that many downloads. I know it. So if I'm going to have a successful podcast in my mind, that eventually, as my dream is that we'll get thousands, even millions of downloads, I've got to show up. Now, there's a quote that I have on my own that I've been using for years. The quote goes like this: show up until they catch up. And it's true. It would be very easy for me to blow off producing this show, but I do it because I'm committed. And I'm committed because I know my why. And I know my why because I know who I am and what I want. And there's a lot of power in that. See, for me, at the end of the day, I love to teach and I love to share ideas. And I know I can best do that through the power of my voice. Now, of course, right now on the internet marketing, video is very powerful, very popular. Everyone's doing video. And at some point, I will get my mind around that. But I'm not a video guy, at least not yet. But until I can muster the courage to do it, I know I can speak into a microphone and hopefully share something or someone who will inspire you to go for your dreams so you can eventually be paid for your creativity, which is the focus of the show. So back to the topic of self-integrity. If I can't keep my word to myself, then what's the point? Because I can tell you from personal experience, there are lots of things I've said in my past and even in my current that I was going to do. And yes, I'm totally putting myself on blast here, but I haven't always followed through. I'm sharing this because perhaps as you're listening to my words right now, maybe you even recognize some of me in your experience. Just for an example, how long have you put off getting started on a creative project only to start, only to hit the pause button a few days or a few weeks later? How many times have you said to yourself before going to bed that you're going to get up at a certain time, only to find yourself hitting the snooze button over and over again? Only to jump out of bed later than you said you were going to, and then spend the day beating yourself up for not doing what you said you were going to do. I know you can't see me right now, but if you could, I've got my hand raised because this has been one of my biggest struggles, getting out of bed when I say I'm going to. I'm not a morning person. So at the end of the day, all of this boils down to self-integrity and keeping your word to yourself, because here's what happens when we don't keep our word to ourselves. And I really learned this from listening to Jim Fortin. When we don't keep our word to ourselves, we actually slowly chip away at our self-esteem and our self-worth. And I'm 55 years old, soon to be 56, and I'm just now getting this. So you're never too old to learn something new. But this is what I'm learning and becoming even more aware of as I've been listening to his podcast episodes. Now, in episode 25 of the podcast, I shared an example of a writer wanting to finally write that long-awaited book. And I gave an example about how to do that. And what I shared was this. If you can manage to write 100 words a day, at the end of 30 days, you've got 3,000 words. If you do it every day of the year, at the end of the year, 1 year, you have a whopping 36,000 words. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds like a book to me. So even if you can only manage to write for 10 minutes here and there, that's still a heck of a lot better than waiting for everything in your life to be perfect before you start. Because trust me, perfect circumstances will never happen. So if you tell yourself you're going to write just 10 minutes a day, but perhaps you miss a day, and you don't get right back on it the next day, but then that rolls into 2 days. Soon it becomes a week. Now, how long do you think it's going to be before you say to yourself, oh, well, I didn't really want to write that book anyway? That's an example of self-integrity, lack of self-integrity. And now can you see, if you continue that pattern, how it will slowly erode at your self-esteem and self-worth? Now, there are many reasons why we don't keep our word to ourselves, and when it's something even when it's something we really want to do. But Jim talks about this in great depth in episode 23, what to do when you're not motivated and want to be. So I'm going to link to that in the show notes of this episode. I highly recommend you check that out. As a matter of fact, at minute 640 in that episode, he specifically talks about how self-integrity can keep you on track. So do give that a listen. And just before that, he talks about why commitment most often needs to precede motivation. Now, as you recall, I just said a moment ago that about commitment in regards to this podcast. I said it would be very easy for me to blow off producing this show because it takes several hours for me to put it together. And at the time I'm recording this, I'm not getting that many downloads. But I do it because I'm committed. And commitment trumps motivation. So when you're committed to whatever it is that you say you want to do, it is much easier for you to become self-integral. Now I'm going to close this episode with one last quote on the subject of commitment by William Hutchinson Murray. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. I want to thank you for listening to the podcast. I wanted to really share this and just really break it down because, again, I want to be as transparent. I want to inspire. I want you to, as you're listening, to see how you can apply some of what I'm learning myself and hopefully sharing with you on how you can get on your own path. So I've got several links to, as I said, Jim's podcast. I've got several links to James Wedmore's podcast, in particular, the episode that I first heard him on, which is the interview that James did with him. I also have the link to episode 25 and another great episode by Jim Fortin called The Biology of Fear. And I have a link to that also in the show notes, episode number 4. Again, I recommend checking out from episode 1 all the way through, but definitely check out these specifically that I listed in the show notes, which you can find at getpaidforyourcreativity.com/026 for episode 26. And all the links to everything will be inside of there. Also, I have another link to episode 24, which is key number 7 from the 57 Ways to Monetize Your Gifts ebook, an audiobook, which I made available to you also here in the show notes at the top of the show. So again, I ask you, if you're enjoying the show, if you're getting value out of what I'm sharing, I would love it if you would just check it out, on iTunes. I've got links to that available on the show notes page. Maybe rate it, leave a review if you feel so inspired. Let me know how I can become better, how I can improve it, how I can make it even a better show for you, even topics that you might want to hear me speak about. Now, if you have topics you'd like me to talk about or you're interested in, check me out on Instagram. I do have a link to that also in the show notes. You can find that there and check me out on Instagram at Creatorpreneur Podcast and send me a DM. And let me know. I will respond to your messages. Let me know. I may even respond back with an audio message as well. Let me know what you're thinking about, what topics you'd like to hear more about. And that helps me only make the show better and make the experience better. So I really want to do that for you. So again, I'd love you to leave a review at getpaidforyourcreativity.com/iTunes podcast. That's the direct link to my show on iTunes, and you can leave a review for me there if you'd like. And also check me out on Instagram at Creatorpreneur Podcast. Again, the links to everything is available in the show notes at Get Paid for Your Creativity Podcast, episode number 26. So until then, have a fantastic week, and I'll see you on episode 27. Take care. We have entered the age of creative self-employment. In the new economy, people are creating true security for themselves. That's why I believe there's never been a better time in history to monetize your gifts. So if you're ready to take control of your financial and creative future, I have something for you. It's my free audio and PDF program, 57 Ways to Monetize Your Gifts and Create True Security for Yourself. And you can get that at my website, getpaidforyourcreativity.com/57ways gift.